Welcome everyone to the show. I'm Zach Pennington. I am the partnership manager here at Switcher Studio, and we have a really excited episode of Made with Switcher today. For those of you who are not familiar with this series, it is all about Switcher Studio creators and sharing some of the awesome work that they are doing with live video. And we are all very fortunate today to have a special guest with us. Our guest is a New York Times bestselling author, illustrator, and educator, and his name is Jarrett J. Krosaska. And he and I will be talking about some of the incredible ways that he has taken his in-person events online and is using live video today. So let's welcome everyone, Jarrett, to the show.
Well, thank you, Zach. And I would say first, congratulations on pronouncing my last name correctly.
Yeah, I would be lying if I didn't say I've been practicing it, in the mirror days on end. Before I go to bed at night, I'm just like, Krosaska.
Well, I appreciate that. You pronounced it flawlessly.
Yes, thank you. Well, growing up, people always spelled my name Z-A-C-H, and I spell it with a K. And just that little minor detail always kind of bugged me. So now I'm very cognizant of how other people say and spell.
Well, I gotta say, speaking of C's and Z's, and this will be a good way to show what Switcher can do and how you can go on the fly. You pronounced my last name correctly, but it's spelled incorrectly on the thing. So it's C-Z-K-A, not S-K-A. And that's the beauty of there are times where I've spelled someone's name wrong when I brought them in as a remote guest, and I said, hold up. Boom. There we go.
I wish I could say that we were clever enough to plan that. Because that is a perfect, tell us more about Switcher feature.
Tell us more about what happened. If you're going to misspell someone's name, use Switcher.
This is the app to do it in, because I'll say rendering it out in Photoshop and sending it back over to your production person on the fly is not going to happen.
Yeah. And it animates, and it had that little bouncy thing.
Exactly. It floated in and out just like it was meant to be. So, Jarrett, your backstory is super interesting. I think the audience would love to hear a little bit about it from you directly. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I write and illustrate books for kids. I have 43 books published. I should say young readers, because I have the book that I've become most known for is for young adults, and it's called Hey Kiddo. And so a part of being an author and illustrator, and I think one of the greatest misconceptions that people have is that, oh, you write and illustrate books, you must just sit in your home and daydream and chat with the bunnies in your yard. But I spend, I would say, 50 to 65% of my time on the road, promoting my books. Part of how I earn an income for my family is by speaking at conferences and book festivals and at schools. So pre-pandemic, as much as I was, chatting with my buddies in the backyard and daydreaming, I was also rushing from gate to gate to gate. And over the years too, and starting when my wife was pregnant with our second kid, and the pregnancy towards the end was pretty rough. I had to cancel all of my in-person events, and so I was using Switcher Studio years, probably right when you all launched, and I've always tried to incorporate connecting with readers virtually to augment the fact that I'm just one person. I can't get everywhere at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's great to know. And how many books did you say you've released?
43.
43 books. Okay, so I'm about 43 books behind you in terms of books I've released, but that's very exciting.
It's only a matter of time before you catch up, Zach.
And the book you're most known for, that's Lunch Lady, correct?
I would say, yeah. If you are in elementary school, you probably know me from Lunch Lady. If you're a high school student, you may have read Lunch Lady when you were a kid, but you probably know me from Hey Kiddo.
That's right. And that's the one. Hey Kiddo is the one that's on the best-selling list, correct?
Yes, yeah, and that's the one that I got a fancy sticker for the National Book Award finalist. So I was lucky enough that I was able to do all the in-person promoting. That book was published a year and change before the pandemic hit. But I don't know if I told you this, Zach, before, but my New Year's resolution in January of 2020 was to do more webcasting.
Oh, interesting. And little did you know that your wishes would be granted.
Yeah, I mean, like nothing like a global shutdown to help you reach your yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like that. I saw a post going around early in the pandemic that said, "If only I had more time to clean my house." Turns out that wasn't the excuse.
That wasn't the problem. No, that wasn't the problem after
It's
all.
like if only I had more time to shoot video from my basement.
That
Now you
worked.
do. Yeah, now
That
you do.
worked.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned a little bit earlier that you've actually been using Switcher for a long time, well before the pandemic, probably, as early as it was available to use by other people. How did you get started? What kind of drew you to doing videos and using Switcher specifically?
Well, one of the pieces that I really wanted to do was, around 2010, 11, I started doing Skype visits, and I would. I'd be traveling. I'd be in Texas, and I would be skyping home with my babies. And I thought, well, there's got to be a way to sort of flip this around so that I could be home with my kids, but then skyping in or video chatting. And when I heard about Switcher Studio and the fact that I could create a much more engaging live virtual experience, because one of the things is I like to draw at my in-person events. And so I have a setup here where I have a sketchbook, I have an overhead shot, and I'm able to really bring the readers like right to where I'm drawing. And in fact, somehow these virtual events become oddly enough more personal than the in-person visits. When I'm speaking, I might have a crowd of 500 or 1,000 students in a space, and so that pad of paper on the stage is really small for those kids in the back row. But when I have my overhead shot and I switch from A to B, and I with Switcher camera A, camera B, those students are like, their noses are at the tip of my pencil in a way that wouldn't be possible in real life. I mean, I'd be like, let's talk about personal space, but it just logistically wouldn't work out.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. I do want to let our audience know that if you all want to leave some comments or questions in the live stream, my producer and I will try to work those in towards the end of the broadcast. So if you have any questions, either now or as they come up, feel free to leave them. So let's talk a little bit about, post pandemic, right? So you said you had a personal goal of doing more live streams in 2020. Then obviously you kind of had to.
Yeah.
And so, given that you've been doing these kind of bigger live events, how did you start to adapt or kind of rework the events to be virtual, to be, a good experience in kind of a totally different environment?
Well, for one, my schedule cleared right up. Right. So whereas in the before times, I might have been spending 30 hours a week just getting to the place where I was going to present, driving, flying, and so my last in-person event was in Pittsburgh, and I was staying across the street from where Mr. Rogers shot his show. And
That's cool.
there's almost like a religious experience to just say, you touch the door, like that's where, I mean, you even though COVID was coming, like, am I allowed to touch doorknobs yet?
Right.
Should I not touch doorknobs? But just thinking like that, Mr. Rogers walked through the store every day to go to work. So that was weighing heavily on my mind as I flew home from Pittsburgh, and then started getting all of the alerts that all of my events were getting canceled and that all of the schools were shutting down for that next week. So quickly over the weekend, my family and I came up with a plan to help bridge the gap for those schools, because none of the schools were prepared, and because no one could have imagined this in their worst of dreams. And so every day at 2 p.m., I was here in my studio live for a YouTube show called Draw Every Day with JJK. And for so many families, it was the only consistent thing that they had in those times that were filled with so much intense anxiety.
Yeah,
And I was able to go in there confidently because I had this recording space carved out because of that January New Year's resolution, and because of what I was doing with Switcher Studio. Like I didn't have to research the like the software. Like I knew exactly. I already had a membership. I already had a bunch of title screens ready to go and animations to fill in. And students across the country, young artists would submit their artwork. So uh, it it's hard. I think I'm only now beginning to understand the profoundness of all of that as we're just getting a little further from it and we're creeping a little bit back into real life. But that all being said, I don't see in-person events for authors and book tours returning until spring 2022, the earliest. I don't see them crowding students into gymnasiums to bring someone in from outside of their community to talk. So it's a real opportunity for me to continue to use Switcher to live zoom in exactly with going into those schools and using Switcher as it connects to Zoom. And as I'm thinking about what is life like when it opens up, how much I heard from people who said, well, we don't live anywhere near a major bookstore or a library that is able to host these kind of events. So the pandemic has been a real opportunity for us to visit with you and other authors in a way that we never had before. So I have in my mind that when the world opens up, when I have a big public event and I'm launching a new book, that my in-person event, that's almost going to be like my live studio audience. And I could use Switcher. I mean, I'll have to make sure I train someone to do that, because when I'm here, I'm doing it all on my own. I don't know that I'd be able to manage a crowd and put on my show and switch at the same time.
Sure. No, I get that. I'm a musician outside of, work and all those things. And I know what it's like to both try to entertain the crowd and also program the lights and change your guitar tone and do all that stuff kind of all at once. And it can
Yeah.
get pretty hectic pretty quickly.
But what a great way for young readers to feel like they're a part of those kind of events when they wouldn't physically be able to be there. I'm really looking forward to the potential we have to reimagine everything we do. I think it would be such a waste of what we went through if we just went right back to the way things were. We have to use all of this as a learning opportunity going forward.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned your setup, all the things around you, some of which we can see, some of which we can't. Do you want to give us a quick BTS?
Yeah. I set up another camera. And so, when I was doing Draw Every Day, people thought I was in a loft in the attic. I am in my basement. I am in a room that's so small that I can touch the ceiling. And everything that's important I want you to see is behind me here, right? Like the books, some awards, some sketchbooks, some tchotchkes. I have my flat files over here. But I have all of the lights coming in. I started with just a simple ring light, did more research. I'm getting a box light that's coming in at a 40 degree angle with another soft light to reflect, and some lights in the back for atmosphere. I have all of my art supplies here. And as you can see, I have wardrobe. I have wardrobe, because knowing how video works, you don't want to be wearing small patterns. You don't want to be wearing a lot of patterns. So it doesn't play well on video. So I just, went online and bought a bunch of brightly colored solid shirts, and I keep them down here so that when I have to come down to do a live, I just, I don't have to plan that much. I barely wash the clothes because I only wear them for 20 minutes at a time, if that. Iron them maybe once every other month. And, it's awesome. It's so convenient. I've been able to drive my kids to school. Drive my kids to school for the past 3 weeks. Otherwise, getting them to their laptop for distance learning. Sure. But to be home when my kids wake up and to be here for dinner every night as a father who traveled all the time, it's such a blessing.
Yeah, for sure. At Switcher, a lot of us have the Switcher logo t-shirts here.
Nice.
And one of the benefits is that when you have 5 of them, you always have one whenever you're going to be on a live stream.
You kind of feel like, when you saw a cartoon character open their closet and they just had 20 of the same thing.
Exactly.
It's kind of what it feels like.
And with the pandemic especially, I feel like I'm just wearing the same 6 pairs of basketball shorts and the same 6 t-shirts.
Yeah, these jeans are kind of, I think that I don't know where my skin ends and these jeans begin.
That's funny. Looks like we have a comment here. Jarrett is a real pro. His office setup is perfect to make live streaming and video content both efficient and visually. Yeah,
Thank you.
no, I agree. And we'll kind of get into your overhead camera
Yeah.
setup as well. But I do love you showing us your wardrobe off,
It's
out of
always just
shot.
right there.
Because I think what's so funny is that we've seen these really elaborate, backdrops for years. I mean, again, pre-COVID, YouTube videos and Twitch streamers and people who are, streaming regularly, and you have no sense of scale, right? Because
Right.
all you have is the frame. And they could be in a garage, they could be in a basement, they could be in a mansion. Like you have no idea.
You have no idea. And something that I learned over the years too is I would try to do these live streams from where I was actually working. And so much of what I'm working on isn't public knowledge yet, right? Especially with the Star Wars Jedi Academy stuff and books that haven't been announced yet. That was always a real stressful thing to try to figure out what do I need to clear out of the background. But here to have a dedicated space, and in talking to other authors who are virtually visiting schools or online book tours, even if you don't need a lot of space, you just need a corner, and just have that be your corner that's always there and ready to go, and you'll be way less stressed in life.
Yeah, we recently moved, and I'm really sad that my guitars are not in the background anymore. They're all over to the left. I used to be able to see my drums and my guitars, and I got to be like the cool rocker guy. I at least have my concert posters behind.
You have your concert posters, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So talk to me a little bit. You mentioned earlier, live it might be difficult to be kind of the on-stage persona and the switcher, but at home you're both, right? At home you're the talent, you're the producer, you're the director,
I'm the tech
editor. Yeah, you're getting yourself coffee mid
exactly.
stream.
I keep water bottles all down here. I also have my orange switcher water bottle, so that I'm never mid event thinking I don't have any water. I mean, there's no one to get me water. My kids don't care about me.
Yeah. Has Switcher talk a little bit about how Switcher's enabled that process for you? We talked about that the other day.
Yeah, I just keep it right here on my, I should say on my desk in front of me. I have all sorts of things that the audience can't see, like Post-it notes. I have a little digital clock that I keep on Velcro. And so I typically have my switcher here on my iPad. And I want to make sure that if it's an ongoing show, I typically just can keep it as is. If I'm going into something new that has different visuals, I want to make sure that's all set to go. I mean, I've incorporated a lot of animations. One thing that I did that was really fun is as we're going live every day, I have this character named Cup of Coffee. And Cup of Coffee is just a disgruntled looking coffee.
That's perfect.
And I would start my show being like, how's it going today, Cup of Coffee? And then I would just switch to an animated version of him going like, oh, it's another day ending in Y, and then switch back to me. I'm like, nah. And because everyone knew it was live, they're like, how is he doing that? How is that? Like they couldn't figure it out.
It's like author, illustrator, magician,
educator. Yeah, it's like, yeah, exactly. And that's the magic about the live, being live, and they know you're live because you're talking about things in real time, but then having to have some pre-roll stuff,
yeah, for sure.
And if and every now and then I'm having guests on, and sometimes I use Switcher too when I'm not live. Like I also have a show that's for older readers called Origin Stories, where I interview other authors, and it's more young adult skewing than the younger skewing. So I keep it on a separate YouTube page, but I pre-record it on Switcher so that I can switch as we talk, and then I'm not doing any editing afterwards.
Yeah, that's a huge time saver. I think a lot of people, there's an adage about every minute of footage is, hours of production. And I think with Switcher, it could be 1-to-1, right? It could be a minute.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So speaking of streaming, you mentioned YouTube. Where are kind of your primary channels? Where do you normally stream your content for both your individual content as well as your live events?
Facebook Live and YouTube Live, and the Facebook Live when the audience is going to be the gatekeepers of children's literature. So that's the parents, the booksellers, the librarians, um, and when I'm on YouTube and my show is geared towards kids 12 and younger, it's a different experience because I market as for kids so that we can comply to the COPA laws, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. So I cannot ask them to solicit ideas in real time. And if there's any time where I ever was asking the audience to visit a website or saying, if you would like to submit your artwork, I cannot address the kids. I have to address the grown-ups. So grown-ups, ask your grown-ups. Grown-ups, you can visit this website. And also important to say grown-ups and not parents, because not every kid has parents at home. You don't know what the situation is, and you want to be as inclusive and universal as possible in your language when you're talking to kids. So I like Facebook Live in that I can have that live interaction, and then also with using it with Zoom as well. If I'm going directly and knowing that it is an adult that is facilitating that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how big have your events been since you moved online? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I mean, when you look at my YouTube analytics, and YouTube wasn't a space that I was super active in, but you see such a huge spike when the pandemic hit, especially those first couple of weeks when no one knew what was going on. So I've racked up about 1 million views in the past year on YouTube, quite a number on Facebook too. And both platforms have extremely different ways to measure what those views are. I think Facebook sometimes, if you're just scrolling through, you're like, what is this? Okay, that's a view. You got a view, right? And then with YouTube, you kind of have to be more purposefully going to it. And also because my channel on YouTube is marked for kids, you can't get an alert when I go live. So I have to do a lot more sort of online marketing to the caretakers and gatekeepers ahead of time to say, I will be live at this time. So that's another reason why consistency is key. During the winter, once I stopped going live every day on YouTube, I would go live every Saturday morning. And that way, there's an expectation of when you're going to be live, which makes it easier to keep and retain and build an audience.
Well, I think when we were growing up, Saturday morning cartoons, right? That was the whole.
That's why I went Saturday morning too.
Yeah,
like,
that was everything. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. I'm going to take a quick second to reset the room for any viewers that have just joined us.
Sure.
So we are live with author and illustrator Jarrett Krasaska. And we're talking about going virtual with your events, as well as live streaming kind of pre and post pandemic, and how you can keep your audience engaged. So if you all have any questions or comments, please drop them in the feed below, and we'll either pop them up on screen if they're timely, or we'll try to get to them at the end. So thank you all so much. All right, let's get to some more questions. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So talking about the book and music festival that you did, what made you feel like you could take this virtual? Like, live events are hard enough to pull off as it is, but was there any components or aspects of it that you thought made it, worth the risk, I guess, of taking that event virtual?
Yeah. So we have this big music and book festival for families that happens. It always happens the last Saturday of March. And of course, March 2020 was, let's say we're not having it, but maybe things will be fine in 2 weeks, So we solicited some pre-recorded performances and just ran that on Facebook on the day of. But this year, after a year of being home, and I think just the general Zoom fatigue that people have for online events too, is that really wanting to up the game to make it special. So making it live, bringing in these authors, using this as an opportunity to bring in artists that live so far away, we wouldn't typically be able to bring them in for budgeting reasons. And students were able to go on and we partner with our local radio station. So they were able to, with their parents, go on Facebook and make requests. One of the things I love about Meltdown is we pull young artists out of the crowd and pull them up on stage to draw with our guest illustrators. So we found a virtual way of doing that, of bringing them in remotely via Switcher Studio, and then having them on a separate screen, use a shared whiteboard. Then I used Switcher Studio to then share my laptop screen so the audience could see what the professional artists and the young artists were drawing in real time. So it's just wanting to, it was for me that was one, wanting to give back to the community and keep a sense of normalcy and consistency. But also as someone who has been doing this for so long, like, okay, I want to prove to myself that I can do this. I'm going to bring in 10 different artists from across the country. Some of them were pre-taped, most of them were live. Do this all in real time. And what's the worst going to happen? Like, no one's going to get hurt. Like, it's just if it goes offline, something, we just bring it back. But yeah, it's a hallmark of our community. This event. So
No, that's really cool. Did you guys have tickets for this event, or how did you manage that?
it was just it's always a free event, and it was a free event via I was on YouTube.
Okay.
Because the idea of a parent putting a kid on YouTube independently is much more plausible than a parent putting a kid on Facebook on their own independently.
That makes sense. Did you change your audio setup and your video setup at all for the event, or did you run it from your main switcher rig, or how did you do all that?
So when I'm using Switcher, I have my iPad here, but then for me, I use my iOS device for the camera that's on me. Mm-hmm. And then I have a laptop right here. And if you want to switch to the overall room, you can see that setup. But that way I can, like, even right now, like, I'm looking at the iPhone because the iPhone has googly eyes. And that's how I remember to make eye contact with the virtual audience. But if I just look down just a little bit, I'll see the my laptop, which is set up right here. So it's all in one eye range. That's not the word. What's the word I'm looking for? Sight line.
Yeah, one sight line. That's
perfect. Eye range. It's right in my eye range. See, that's the thing about going. See, if this was pre-recorded, like, you'd be like, oh crap, we're gonna re-record the whole thing all over again.
Line.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. I've got, you can't see it obviously because it's all in front of me, but I've got one big monitor, and so I try to be somewhat strategic about where I put each piece of content on the monitor, because it becomes very obvious, when I'm reading or not reading, or looking or not looking. And so I've got our faces up close to the webcam, as close as they can be,
so that you can.
And I've got, a question, or my questions over kind of near the other side. Then I've got my text chat with our producer being like, hey, I don't understand this, or can you see me? Can you hear me? So yeah, you've got to be able to have kind of all your little peripherals and birdies kind of all flying in the same direction.
All right there. It's like driving a car. Like, imagine if like the blinkers were like all the way over there. Like, it has to be all right here.
We have a pretty good question from the audience about whether or not you're going to continue going live once, you don't have to, right? Once you can go 1,000 people in a gymnasium, all hanging out, hugging and dancing and breathing each other's air.
Yeah, I think there'll be a mix. I would imagine and look, I was probably visiting 60 or 70 schools, universities a year in person. So I imagine it'll be a little bit of half and half. I imagine that when I travel for in-person events, they will be for more sort of like high profile, 1,000 people in a crowd. But if it's an event where I don't have a new book out, and it's maybe a school that wants to have me, but there's a lot of travel involved, I'm going to be more prone to ask to do it virtually. And I think that because there has been so much knowledge gained over the past year by everyone on how to access live video, I think there'll be an appetite. I mean, I think right now there's a lot of fatigue in the educational space because of Zoom school, right? But I think that the pendulum will swing back for extracurricular activities.
Yeah, I think that you're right. I actually own a karaoke bar outside of this, and we tried to open in March of 2020, which is the single worst time.
Like you were launching it in March of 2020?
Yeah. So, I'm banking that in-person entertainment's going to come back in a big way. But we did use live video very early on to do, karaoke competitions where it's basically only the performer and our staff. And, so we might still use live streaming to stream what's going on at the venue. but
Yeah,
it's not because we can't have people in person. It's a way to just include more people, like you were talking about earlier, who
I
might
think
not be
so.
able to make it.
I think so too. Did you? I don't know if you're into like stand-up comedy, but I went
Yeah,
to some of the Mike Birbiglia virtual stand-up shows,
yeah,
and like I've got 3 kids, so the idea of like putting the kids to bed and then being able to sit and have a time with my wife, and we're just having our grown-up time, and then there's no drive home, and I'm just going right to bed. It was great.
yeah. No, that's awesome. The convenience factor is definitely not lost on most of us. I think the commute alone, people are kind of not going to miss not having
Yeah.
to commute. All right, so I have kind of a rapid fire set of questions, and you've touched on some of these briefly. Um,
Okay.
but when we spoke the other day, you've produced a lot of events, and
Mhm.
you've had your challenges that I think that we all have when we're producing both live events and streaming events. But talk to me a little bit about some of those challenges. So the first one I remember you mentioning is being by yourself, right?
Being by myself, and I did one Facebook Live in which, yeah, it's exactly what it feels like. I did one Facebook Live where everyone was giving me the angry reaction, and I was like, well, I was muted, and I had no way of knowing I was muted, right? And then on the flip side too, I remember at times where I didn't mute, you could hear me drop to like, oh crap, like I'm like, thankfully I didn't use an expletive, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's the challenge of having quality control when you're by yourself. Um, but it's also amazing to have that freedom, because I did have a studio assistant before this, but it just wasn't safe, to have her at the house. Uh, so yeah, and and the times where I have had help, I would do sketchathons to raise money, and I'd be drawing in my studio for 5 hours, and everything I drew would immediately go on eBay, and there was something really nice about having a studio assistant switching it for me, but there's a lot of great freedom in being able to do it on your own.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Another thing you mentioned is that a lot of your content is kid friendly. And so there are some specific things you had to do. Like you mentioning grown-ups, you can't do calls to action. Are there any other kind of nuances of being a kid friendly content producer?
I mean, the obvious ones is the same as if you're in person, right? Like monitoring your language, and
Yeah.
even though I speak to high school students, I had one high school ask, like, well, I want to make sure Jarrett's not going to curse in front of the students. It's like, I'm still a professional. Like, I'm not, even though there's cursing in my book because it's about real life, but
Yeah.
I think kids also have a much shorter attention span. And so it's about keeping it engaging, and it's sort of the same mentality I have when I'm in person. When I'm in person, I have slides, and there's slides moving behind me, and there's animations, and there's videos. So it can't just be a talking head for a minute, like a minute of just a talking head. Like you would lose your audience.
Kids have to be just the toughest audience. I mean, I've performed in a various capacities, whether it's public speaking or music or whatever, and played in front of a lot of audiences. And yeah, I think as a substitute teacher, I did that for a long time too. And man, kids are
Yeah,
tough crowd.
I learned very early in my career not to ask questions like, "Do you kids want to hear another story?"
Yeah.
Because oftentimes they'll be like, "No."
They're so honest. I love it. They're like, no, that first one was bad. And you're like, oh,
Yeah,
okay,
no, it's
thanks.
only going to be down from here. Yeah.
But when you get them going and laughing and rolling and following you, then it's like the best feeling, right?
It is. And while I miss that immediate feedback from the audience in real life events, I love seeing photos of kids engaging with the content I make, because either their parents or their teachers are posting photos online. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Another thing you mentioned the other day when we were talking is, you're in a basement, and guess who's above you? The rest of your family.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So talk about some of the challenges with that.
Well, we'll see. I don't. We'll see in the time we have left what'll happen. But there's a vent right here, and my son is 4, and he has his meltdowns right above me, and so that sound just comes right down through the vent. And if someone were to ring the doorbell, I have 3 dogs that'll bark. That'll be pretty loud. And so that's where I was like, I need to invest in good sound. Like, instead of my voice trying to hit the iOS device all the way over there, having some sort of mic or something quality audio, so it's going to really hyper focus on where it's taking that extra note, so that all the extra noise is gone and it's focusing right here.
Yeah, no, I know all of us have had to adapt rather, be it kids, pets, spouses, partners, whoever, roommates.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's where being down here is perfect, because I mean, I can't hear them running around up there, but you can't. But like, if this space was just adjacent to the TV room, like, forget it. Like, we would have, my family would have imploded by now. Would be trying to do these live events right here.
For sure. And then the last thing, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but you're a big Post-its guy as well off screen. That's kind of that's your extra producer, extra brain.
Yeah, I've got my Post-its here, and if I ever want to make sure I remember something, another thing too is, when I'm Zooming with educators, it might say their name, but I always want to make sure, like, well, how do the students address you? Just to write names down, and I'm going to miss that in real life. Like, I want to be able to just have Post-it notes on people's names, like, just a hidden, like, forever. But especially the mute unmute Post-it is crucial.
Crow sauce. Crow,
yeah,
sauce.
Exactly.
I have 4 Post-its for your name right in front of
nice.
me.
It demands it. It's a long name.
Awesome. Well, let's see if we have any more questions. Want to open this up to the audience here. So Ryan, if you got any good questions for us. Ernesto, one of our engineers, one of my fellow.
I was going to say, I recognize his name from watching the Switcher Lives myself when you're rolling out new stuff.
So he asks, do you have a content calendar, or are most of your live streams impromptu?
My live streams are planned. I definitely plan those ahead of time, because just like for real life events, I need to let people know I'm going to be there. So on Facebook, I've been going live once a month with Switcher for a live from the flat files, which is for educators. And then, as I mentioned with the YouTube thing, it needed to be consistent. But in regards to my other video social media posts, I'm a little more impromptu about that, but I feel like maybe I should do a better job of getting a content calendar, just to plan out and stretch things out and not step on my own feet and posting too much at once.
Yeah. I think one issue we've seen, especially in the last year or so, is if you plan too far in advance, you can end up seeming really out of touch and insensitive.
Yes. I used to like pre-schedule my blogs weeks out, and you're like, oh yeah, you could look like a real jerk.
A mass shooting or something horrible happens, and you're like, check out our new product that's on sale, and people are like,
yeah, wow, no, it's not. Read the room.
Yeah.
Read the room.
Yeah, no, for sure. So there's definitely, having a high level strategy, I think, is probably valuable, but not being so stuck in the.
I should say, I guess to Nestor's, I do have, say, a notes app with just constant ideas of videos, because now I've been playing around with TikTok and real short form stuff. So just like anything, just you're constantly brainstorming. Unless you write it down, you're never gonna remember it.
Yeah, for sure. It looks like we got 2 more questions for you. One's from Haley. How do you decide what content would make a good live stream?
Well, I see Haley and Chewbacca are BFFs. I hope that Chewie gets his vaccine so that you can hug and gather once again, Haley. And so, what makes a good content for what I do? I feel very lucky that I write and draw the pictures. So, if as an illustrator, and I've seen other illustrators present, and when they don't draw, it's like there's a magician that, like, yeah, there's a rabbit in the hat. I don't feel like taking it out. so drawing, and if you have a chance to take requests from the audience, and also strategically being here next to my flat files, so I can just reach in and grab, some of the paintings from some of my books and just very quickly show my audience to say, hey, this is an original painting, and then this is what it looks like printed up in the book, in a way that, again, that I can't do in person, because I'm not going to take all this original art with me.
I think I'm hearing the sound of the kids running around upstairs.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. There it is. Like,
it is coming through. Yeah.
Nice.
Which is perfect because, again, this is live. You're a real person. You've got a real family. You're in a real house.
Yes.
I think we have one more question from the audience here. So what is your biggest takeaway for producing a large virtual event, and especially on how to make it a memorable experience?
I think with Meltdown, because it was filling the void of not being able to do something we typically do, was the key there. In regards to making something a memorable event, I'm going to go back again to the fact that I can draw, and so if I'm bringing in a live guest and we can collaborate in real time, or talk about craft, there's something nice about seeing two artists, talk about what they do, because you feel like you're sort of eavesdropping. But I think like all social media, you just have to be yourself. Like, if you're not yourself, it's going to be so obvious. It's going to be so awkward and dry. You just have to, whoever you are and whatever you do, you create a version of that for your live streams, and that'll be exactly what your particular audience wants.
Yeah, for sure. I always worry when I do these live streams for work that I'm being too much of myself, but I think that's the I've even got like drumsticks sitting next to me on my desk, and I'm just
Nice.
Just like, yeah, I'm wearing my favorite band's hoodie. Like, this is who I am as a person, right?
Who's your favorite band? What is it? I didn't see.
They're called Thrice.
That's a cool name.
Wrong side. Yeah. So they're just
Nice.
Rock band. They've been around forever, since I was a teenager, and their music's grown up with me, and I've grown up with them. So it's been one of those.
That's awesome.
Bands have stuck around for me. Well, let's see. So we're about at the end of the broadcast here. So where are some good places for people to find you online and on social media? I think we've got some of your handles that we can pull up here.
Sure. I'm Studio JJK on everything. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, TikTok. Although I don't use Pinterest all that much. I feel like I should up my Pinterest game, but I think you can only handle so much. I mean, I'm most interested in creating stories that are told through words and pictures, like I do for my job. And so the platforms that I can be a visual storyteller are the ones that I get most excited about.
Yeah, and that's
YouTube, of course, too.
Of course. I was say that's also your .com, right? Studio JJK.
It's studiojjk.com, yeah, because I knew early on. I mean, Krasoska.com, no one would find it. I would have to buy like every misspelled version of Krasoska.
Yeah, for sure. I do own ZachPennington.com, which I'm very happy about, but I only own it with the CK, right? Not with the CH.
Yeah. So
if you're
watch out for Zach with an H.
Yeah. If you're looking for me at ZachPennington.com, you're awesome. Well, this has been really fun for me. I hope it's been fun for you.
It's been great.
And I hope it's been great for our audience. I want to thank everyone for watching this. If you want to follow Switcher Studio for more live streams like this, that would be great. And you can share your own live streams using the hashtag #MadeWithSwitcher on social media. And we actually very actively monitor that hashtag and share a lot of that stuff, at least internally. And oftentimes we share it with our audience and bring people onto shows like this. So, Jarrett, it's been awesome, man. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Zach, thank you. It was so nice to talk to you, not just because I don't get to talk to humans all that much. I really enjoyed this.
I'd say having a conversation with someone above the age of your kid's age is probably welcome break. Now, it's been fun. I hope you guys stay warm and safe up there in Massachusetts, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Likewise to you.
Yep. Cheers, everyone. Thanks for coming.